Hey, Stoic warriors. Welcome back to Deep Dive Stoic. Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked away from a conversation thinking, why did I let them speak to me like that? That quiet frustration, the one that lingers long after the moment passes, comes from knowing you allowed someone to cross a line you never meant to open. Some people don't speak to express truth. They speak to control. They interrupt, belittle, and disguise their cruelty as confidence. They expect your silence to mean surrender. But Stoicism teaches something far more powerful than reacting. It teaches you how to respond. With clarity, with self-mastery, with precision. In this video, you'll discover how to disarm rudeness without ever raising your voice. Not with anger, but with poise. Not through argument, but through self-respect. If you've ever felt the urge to say less but mean more, stay with me, because what you're about to learn might just change the way you handle conflict forever. Today, I'm going to walk you through 7 Stoic rules on how to leave a rude person speechless. Timeless principles rooted in ancient wisdom that will help you walk through confrontation with composure and walk away with power intact. Rule number 1, I'm not the one. Try someone who tolerates nonsense. Have you ever met someone who wasn't trying to be funny or misunderstood? Just blatantly rude, as if testing how much disrespect you'll tolerate before you finally push back. There are people like that, not looking for clarity but looking for control. They want to see if they can walk all over you while you keep smiling and pretending it's fine. I've played that role too many times. The quiet one, the peacekeeper. The person who forced a grin and bit their tongue to keep things professional. But there comes a moment when your silence starts eating away at your dignity. When staying quiet feels less like maturity and more like self-betrayal. Mine came in a meeting I'll never forget. I had spent weeks preparing a presentation, research, strategy, every detail. And while I was speaking, this guy, let's call him Colin, leaned back, smirked, and said, "Do you even understand what you're saying? Sounds like fluff to me." Time froze. That burning feeling rose in my chest. The moment your body knows it's time to speak before your mind even catches up. So I did. Calm, steady. I looked him in the eye and said, "I'm not the one. Try someone who tolerates nonsense." And just like that, the air shifted. He blinked. The smirk faded. No one laughed. But no one defended him either, because deep down they were waiting for someone to draw the line. And that day I did. Here's something no leadership book will tell you. Most rude people don't have real power. They just haven't been challenged. They thrive in spaces where no one dares to confront them. But when you hold your ground, not with yelling, not with sarcasm, but with unshakable clarity, you take away their spotlight, you remove their illusion of control. Because people who thrive on disrespect are often strangers to inner peace. They talk over others not because they're bold, but because silence terrifies them. They toss insults because reflection would force them to confront what's missing inside. That's not strength, that's noise. And you don't need to match noise with noise. You only need one sentence, spoken with calm conviction, to remind them, "You've mistaken my silence for wagness as to wait, so." And that ends here. And yes, when you finally start setting boundaries, some people will say you've changed. Let them. When you stop making yourself available for disrespect, some will call you difficult. Let them. You weren't born to shrink around fragile egos. You were born to protect your energy, to guard your peace, and to live with purpose. And peace, true peace, is not passive. It's a discipline. So, the next time someone tests you with sarcasm or tries to play alpha in a room full of people, you don't need to shout. Just look them in the eye, calm, steady, unmoved, and say, "Try someone else. I'm not the one." Because the day you stop explaining yourself to those who disrespect you is the day you take your power back. And that kind of quiet clarity, that kind of poise, it's unforgettable. Rule number 2, I'm not offended. I just don't value your opinion enough. There's something oddly amusing about how certain people assume their opinion should shape your world, as if just saying something out loud gives it weight. They drop criticism like it's gold, expecting your entire foundation to shake. But here's the truth. Not every opinion deserves to enter your space, let alone influence your direction. The words that hit hardest often come from people whose voices shouldn't even be near your inner circle. And when you realize that, a powerful calm settles in. You don't need to react, explain, or defend. You simply remember, I'm not offended. I just don't value your opinion enough. That's not bitterness, that's clarity. It's not defiance, it's discernment. I remember a moment so clearly because it was the first time I felt truly untouchable. There was a guy I knew, let's call him Derek. He was the kind who masked jealousy as concern, always offering that signature fake compliment with a subtle twist of judgment. One day I shared a project online, something deeply personal, something I had worked on for months. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Derek didn't skip a beat. He commented, "This feels kinda cringe. Is that really the vibe you're going for?" Old me would have either defended it or second-guessed everything, but this time I didn't flinch. I didn't shrink. I didn't explain. I simply replied, "I'm not offended. I just don't value your opinion enough to care." No heat, no edge, just truth. And the silence that followed, it said everything. Here's what many don't understand. Not every voice is qualified to shape your path. Some people speak from insecurity, not wisdom. They haven't built anything, yet hand out judgments like they're experts. If you let every comment filter into your mind, you turn your soul into a public forum, open to anyone, dominated by noise. Stoicism reminds us that your mind is sacred ground. It's not a billboard. It's not a suggestion box. It's a fortress. Marcus Aurelius wrote often that the opinions of others reflect more about them than about us. And he was right. The harshest critics are rarely in the arena. They're not the ones risking building or showing up. They're the spectators, loud, passive, and safe on the sidelines. When you respond not with anger, but with stillness, you shatter the illusion they ever had power over you. You don't need to be offended by someone who doesn't understand your purpose. Their disapproval isn't a signal to change. It's a reminder to stay centered. That's not arrogance, that's self-respect. The day you stop seeking approval from those who can't see your vision is the day you start moving freely. So next time someone tosses out a careless critique, wraps their envy in a joke, or tries to get under your skin with a passing comment, pause, breathe, smile, and say it without flinching. I'm not offended. I just don't value your opinion enough. Because the most powerful people aren't loud, they're focused, and focused people don't need permission to keep going. Rule number 3. That's a strange way to beg for attention. Not every insult is a sign of honesty. Sometimes it's just desperation in disguise. Some people don't throw shade because they're clever. They do it because they're starving for relevance. And the moment you understand that, their words lose all their sting. These aren't people seeking truth. They're seeking an audience. They're loud, reckless, and quick to jab at whatever's bright in the room, hoping their sarcasm masks the fact that they're slowly fading into the background. When you look beyond the smirk, what you see isn't strength. It's someone aching to be noticed. And sometimes the most disarming response you can offer isn't a counterattack, it's a mirror. You simply say, "That's a strange way to beg for attention," and suddenly the performance ends, because performers crumble when the crowd stops clapping. I remember a gathering where the energy was light, the company solid, but as always there was that one person, the habitual spotlight thief. Let's call him Ethan. He thrived on being loud, not insightful. He cracked jokes that weren't funny, only sharp, jabs at people's clothes, careers, even their laughter. And then, of course, he turned to me. "Still working on that little side project of yours?" He sneered. "Must be nice to have that much free time." The old version of me would have laughed it off, maybe even over-explained what I was working on, but this time I didn't play his game. I looked at him calmly, smiled, and said, "That's a strange way to beg for attention. Do you need a hug or just an audience?" The room fell into a perfect silence. Not the awkward kind, but the kind where truth takes up all the space. Everyone saw it clearly. It wasn't wit. It wasn't charm. It was insecurity, dressed up and desperate. Here's the thing. People like Ethan aren't villains. They're just unsettled. They're often fighting battles within themselves they're too afraid to face directly. So instead they reach outward. They insult others to distract from the silence they fear. Because silence forces them to sit with who they really are, and that's terrifying. So they fill the air with noise, sarcasm, and cruelty, hoping to avoid their own reflection. But Stoic strength isn't about punishing them. It's about seeing them, and seeing through them. When you calmly call out what they're actually doing, not to hurt them but to reveal what's real, you take away the only tool they had, their illusion. Attention seekers don't fear insults, they fear exposure. And when you give them that exposure without ever raising your voice, you shift the entire power dynamic without needing to argue. We live in a time where loudness is mistaken for confidence, where snark is mistaken for depth, but you don't have to match their chaos. You don't have to play their game. Your job isn't to lower yourself to respond. It's to rise above and make them realize the game is over. So the next time someone throws a jab at you in front of others, the kind of comment meant to impress an audience or assert dominance, don't flinch. Don't fire back. Just smile, tilt your head slightly, and say it with perfect calm. That's a strange way to beg for attention. Then let the silence do the rest. Because when someone seeks validation through insult, the one thing they can't handle is being seen for what they really are. Not a threat, not a rival, just insecure. And your clarity? That's the loudest response of all. Rule number 4. Every time you speak, it's a reminder to value silence. There's a very specific kind of noise that doesn't come from traffic, chaos, or crowds. It comes from people. People who speak not to build, but to broadcast. Not to offer insight, but to dominate space. They fill every pause with commentary, not because they have something important to say, but because they're uncomfortable with stillness. You've seen it before. The loudest person in the room, the one who talks over others, who blurts out opinions as if volume equals truth. But here's the insight Stoicism teaches us. You don't have to silence them to take back your peace. Sometimes the most powerful response is observation. Stillness. One single calm sentence that turns the noise into a mirror. Every time you speak, it's a reminder to value silence. That sentence doesn't need to be shouted. It needs to be delivered with a clarity so sharp it cuts through their performance without ever raising your voice. I remember a time when I was part of a group chat. A place where ideas were supposed to flow, where learning and growth were the goal. But in every conversation there was this one person, and let's call him Jordan, the first to jump in, the last to let go. No topic was too sacred, no space too quiet. Whether we were discussing books, relationships, work, or philosophy, he always had something to say, but rarely anything to add. He didn't share thoughts, he shared noise. His words were often borrowed from headlines or half-read articles, covered in pessimism and disguised as opinions. And then one day, in the middle of a conversation about personal growth, he confidently tried to correct someone on a subject he clearly didn't understand. It wasn't about helping, it was about asserting himself. That was the moment I realized I didn't need to argue. I didn't even need to correct him. I simply said with a calm and neutral tone, "Every time you speak, it's a reminder to value silence." The reaction was immediate, not loud, not defensive, just quiet. Because truth doesn't need to raise its voice. It just needs to be heard once. The room fell still, not out of discomfort, but because what was unspoken finally had a voice. Everyone knew what I meant, because they'd felt it too. The fatigue that comes from constant, unnecessary noise. You see, some people dominate conversations not because they have wisdom, but because they fear being invisible. Silence terrifies them because it forces reflection, and in that reflection there's no validation, no applause, just reality. So they keep talking, hoping to outrun the emptiness. But Stoicism teaches us that the most powerful person in any room isn't the loudest. It's the one who can sit with silence and still feel whole. There is elegance in restraint. There is wisdom in brevity. And there is strength, immense, unforgettable strength, in choosing not to compete with noise. Stoic power doesn't come from crushing someone with words. It comes from knowing when to say nothing and when to say just enough. As the old proverb goes, empty barrels make the most noise. And it's true. The people who shout the loudest often have the least to offer. They confuse attention with respect, sarcasm with intelligence, noise with presence. But when you respond with poise and precision, when you simply shine a light on their emptiness, you remind everyone in the room that stillness isn't weakness, it's control. So the next time someone tries to hijack a conversation with arrogance or fill the air with commentary that lacks depth, Don't match their energy. Don't try to out-talk them. Just pause, look them in the eye and say, every time you speak, it's a reminder to value silence. Then let the silence speak louder than anything they could ever say, because when you master the art of restraint, you master the moment. And when you master the moment, no one can take your peace away. Rule number 5. If you're trying to hurt my feelings, you'll have to try harder. Most people who throw insults aren't looking for honesty. They're looking for control. They want to provoke, to pull a reaction from you that gives them power. It's not about the words they use. It's about the flinch they're hoping to see. They want to know they can reach inside your peace and shake it. But Stoicism teaches something that instantly breaks that cycle. Emotional sovereignty. The ability to feel the jab, recognize it for what it is, and still choose your response. No flinch, no panic, just calm. That's the moment when the dynamic flips. When they realize their attempt to hurt you has failed. And in that moment, with full composure, you smile and say, if you're trying to hurt my feelings, you'll have to try harder. Not as a defense, not as sarcasm, but as truth. Because you've done the inner work. Because your peace wasn't built on their approval, and it's not shaken by their disapproval. I remember what it used to feel like, back when words hit harder than fists, when someone's judgment could linger for days. There was a guy, Lucas, who once looked me up and down and laughed. You actually think that looks good? I pretended to shrug it off. I even laughed. But I went home and changed. Not because I believed him, but because deep down I feared he might be right. Another time someone scoffed at my dreams. You really think you're going to make it? And for weeks I wrestled with self-doubt, but over time something changed. Not because the world got kinder, but because I got stronger. Life has a way of breaking you open, and if you lean into that pain, it also builds you back sharper, wiser, more grounded. I stopped listening, not because the criticism stopped, but because it stopped mattering. I had lived through enough storms to know that someone else's thunder doesn't control my sky. The truth is, people can only wound you deeply when you secretly believe what they're saying. But when you've healed, when you've confronted your fears and stood back up from your failures, cheap shots don't land. They bounce off. You become the kind of person who's walked through fire and no longer panics at the sight of smoke. And when someone tries to bruise you with a passive-aggressive comment, you don't need to defend yourself. You just look them in the eye, not with arrogance, but with total peace, and say, if you're trying to hurt my feelings, you'll have to try harder. Because anyone who thinks a throwaway insult can shake someone who's fought real battles clearly doesn't understand resilience. Here's the harsh truth. Some people feel tall only when you feel small. They feed off your doubt. They weaponize your emotion. They want to see if they can shift your energy, control your narrative. But the moment you stop being emotionally accessible to people who haven't earned that access, you win. That one sentence? It's not just a witty comeback. It's a declaration. It says, you don't define me. Your words don't shape me. I've lived through worse and grown stronger for it. Stoicism teaches us that the most powerful form of defense is self-mastery. Not reacting isn't weakness, it's wisdom. So the next time someone aims to chip away at your spirit with a joke that's not funny, or a jab that's dressed up as honesty, don't get drawn into their drama. Don't mirror their chaos. Just stand your ground and say, if you're trying to hurt my feelings, you'll have to try harder. Then walk away. Not because you're fragile, but because you're focused. Because you've got better things to build than someone else's ego. And because silence from someone strong, that echoes louder than any insult ever could. Rule number 6. You're not on the level to get a reaction from me. There are some lines so sharp they don't cut the other person. They slice clean through the illusion of power. And this is one of them. You're not on the level to get a reaction from me. It doesn't insult. It doesn't provoke. It doesn't even argue. It simply states a truth that puts everything into perspective. Not everyone is worthy of your emotional energy. Some people crave attention so badly, they'll throw passive-aggressive jabs, stir conflict, or bait you into a reaction just to feel seen. But when you refuse to take the bait, when you meet provocation with complete stillness, you break the loop. You remind them and yourself that your peace is not public property. It's earned, and they haven't earned it. There was a moment at my old job I'll never forget. I was presenting a new initiative, clean, well-researched, strategic, something I had invested serious time and thought into. And right in the middle of the presentation, this guy, Trent, leaned back in his chair and smirked. "Not bad," he said, loud enough for the room to hear, for someone who's usually 5 minutes late. The comment wasn't about punctuality. It was about power. His attempt to shrink my moment. And in that split second, I had options. I could have fired back. I could have explained myself. But instead, I looked at him, calm, steady, and said, "You're not on the level to get a reaction from me." Then I turned right back to the screen and kept going. The room shifted, not because I raised my voice, but because I didn't. Because I didn't let him steer my emotions. And that threw him off more than any comeback ever could. Here's the deeper truth. Some people don't care about understanding you. They care about interrupting you. They thrive off chaos, especially emotional chaos. And if you let them, they'll drag you into it. But when you stand still, when you don't take the bait, don't match the tone, don't even flinch, they lose access. And for someone who lives for validation, that's the most painful thing of all. Stoicism teaches us that true power is not about how loud you speak, but how little you let others disturb your center. When you realize not everyone deserves a seat at your emotional table, you stop reacting to people who show up only to flip it over. What this line does, and why it works so well, is it reclaims your authority without aggression. It says, "I don't need to argue to win. I don't even see you as competition." That's devastating to someone who hoped to shake you. Because the truth is, being ignored by someone grounded is more destabilizing than being yelled at. It sends a message: I'm focused on my goals, not your games. I know who I am. I don't need to prove it in the middle of a meeting or an argument. And when you hold that line, you create emotional distance. The very thing people like Trent can't handle. They depend on emotional access. Take that away, and their performance falls flat. So next time someone tries to get under your skin with a dig, a joke, or a challenge disguised as feedback, don't feed the fire. Don't defend your dignity. Demonstrate it. Look them in the eye, hold your ground, and say with unshakable calm, "You're not on the level to get a reaction from me." Then shift your focus. Change the subject. Keep going like they never even spoke. Because storms can't shake what's rooted. And in a world where everyone's trying to be heard, there's nothing more powerful than the silence of someone who knows their worth. Rule number 7. That was a lot of effort just to sound insecure. This line doesn't shout, it doesn't insult, it doesn't even break a sweat. And yet it lands with surgical precision, because it cuts straight through the performance and exposes what the other person was working so hard to hide: insecurity. That's what most veiled insults are anyway. Not attacks, but confessions. Confessions of envy, of fear, of a lack of self-worth. But most people don't know how to translate that. So they dress up their discomfort in sarcasm, in backhanded compliments, in clever-sounding jabs meant to knock you down just enough to feel taller themselves. And when you calmly look them in the eye and say, "That was a lot of effort just to sound insecure," you don't destroy them. You expose them. You hand them the mirror. And that, to someone who's been hiding behind a mask, is unbearable. I remember presenting a project I had poured weeks into, thoughtful, thorough, and deeply personal. As the final slide faded, the room quieted, that beautiful brief stillness right before feedback begins. And then came Darren, the guy who always had something smug to say, as if being unimpressed made him superior. He leaned back and said, "Well, I guess confidence really can make anything sound smart." It was one of those comments meant to be a joke. Not openly cruel, but wrapped in just enough shade to wound you if you let it. But I didn't. Not that time. I didn't defend the project. I didn't explain the effort behind it. I didn't react at all. I just looked at him, calm and unbothered, and said, "That was a lot of effort just to sound insecure." Then I turned my focus to the next question. The room went still, because the truth had been spoken, and no one needed to add anything else. That's the power of clarity. When you stop taking every comment personally and start recognizing what's really being said and why, everything changes. Most insults aren't about you. They're about someone else's pain bleeding through their words. Their need to be seen, to feel superior, to matter. Even if it means chipping away at others to do it. But Stoicism teaches us that insults only have power if we give them a place to land. When your self-worth is rooted deep, it can't be shaken by shallow words. When you know who you are, you don't need to convince anyone else. And you certainly don't need to react to someone who's trying to poke holes in your light, because they're still afraid of their own darkness. And what makes this line so effective is that it doesn't come from anger. It comes from insight. It doesn't escalate. It reveals. And when people realize their effort to cut you down only reflected their own weakness, it disarms them completely. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to deliver a monologue. You just need one sentence, steady, poised, and razor sharp. That was a lot of effort just to sound insecure. Then let the silence that follows carry the weight of the truth. You don't owe them more. You don't owe them drama. And you definitely don't owe them access to your emotional world. Here's the key. When you respond with calm truth, you're not fighting back. You're leveling up. You're taking control of the space, of the energy, and of the moment. And you're doing it without ever leaving your inner peace. So the next time someone tries to disguise envy as humor or throws a jab in hopes of pulling you off balance, don't flinch. Don't explain. Just breathe, smile, and let that one sentence do all the heavy lifting. That was a lot of effort just to sound insecure. Then let your stillness speak louder than any insult ever could. Because when you can name the insecurity behind the noise, without judgment, without fear, you don't just protect your peace. You teach them something about their own. These 7 comebacks aren't just clever lines. They're calm boundaries. They're unshakable reminders that not everyone deserves access to your energy. In a world where people shout to be heard and provoke to feel seen, your greatest power is found in stillness. Each of these lines doesn't just silence rudeness, it reclaims your space. It says, you don't get to enter my peace just because you're loud. Because real strength isn't proven by how intensely you react. It's proven by how little you allow someone else's chaos to touch your center. So the next time someone tries to insult you, provoke you, or pull you into their storm, remember this. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to win the argument. You don't even need to explain yourself. One sentence delivered with calm, grounded precision, like a scalpel, not a sword, can cut through the noise more powerfully than any outburst ever could. Let them sit with the weight of their own words. Let your silence echo longer than their attitude. Say it once. Say it clearly. Then walk away, not in defeat, but in focus, because you have better things to build. A mind to sharpen, a life to protect. If this video spoke to you, drop "stay silent" in the comments. Let the world know you're not playing by the rules of noise anymore. And if you're ready to keep building strength through stillness, make sure to subscribe. There's more to come. Not loud, not forced, but sharp, powerful, and deeply rooted in wisdom. Until next time. Stand tall, speak with intention, and above all, protect your peace.